Hello and welcome to Global Payfest 25. I'm Freddie Morehouse, Associate Director at JGA Recruitment, and I'll be your host for this Japan session as we continue our 24-hour journey exploring the complexities of global payroll. Japan's payroll system is incredibly meticulous and deeply rooted in legal, cultural, and social conventions. From monthly tax filings to mandatory bonuses and social insurance structures, managing payroll here is both highly structured and sensitive to detail. I'm joined today by Ilhami Mustapha, Senior Global Payroll Manager from GoGlobal and a global payroll expert with a deep understanding of Japan's payroll framework and its unique challenges for multinational organizations. Ilhami has worked extensively with clients navigating the intricacies of statutory deductions, year-end adjustments, and labor law compliance in Japan. Ilhami is 3 months into his journey with GoGlobal, who are a leading professional services business that guide and establish and manage global payroll operations. They definitely bring the human touch to entering new markets and consolidating vendors through a single point of management and enable businesses to recruit and hire globally, drive expansion into new markets, and optimize local operations. With a presence in over 140 countries on 6 continents and growing, GoGlobal are the perfect fit to join us for this year's Global Payfest. Ilhami, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Can you tell us a bit about your background and how you support companies with payroll in Japan?
Okay, thank you, Freddie. Hello, my name is Ilhami Mustapha, and I am from Malaysia. I am the Senior Global Payroll Manager for GoGlobal. I was studying in Tokyo, Japan, majoring in electronic engineering and working as an engineer with a Japanese company previously. Somehow along the way, my career path deviated and I got myself involved in payroll. I have experience from both vendor and client side, starting from Japan, which later on expand to other countries across the APAC region. Specifically for Japan, my role is mainly to bridge both global and local in terms of aligning processes due to its unique way of working and language barrier, this to ensure we achieve our objectives and goals.
Thanks, Ilhami. It's great to have you. Today, we'll dive into Japan's payroll structure, discuss recent updates, walk through a case study, and then finish with a Q&A to address some of the most common questions we hear from global payroll leaders. So let's get started with your expert presentation, Ilhami, if you'd like to begin.
Okay, thank you, Freddie. It's a real pleasure to be here at Global Payfair. Japan payroll system is, for me, one of the most detailed and tightly regulated in the world, but it's also deeply rooted in cultural norms, tradition, and a high-trust work environment. My goal in this session is to unpack the essential elements of Japanese payroll, highlight recent reforms, and help global employees navigate through highly structured but often nuanced landscape. Let's start with the key features of the Japan payroll. Okay, first, Japan operates on the monthly payroll cycle, with most companies paying on the 25th of each month on the last working week. However, this isn't codified in the law. It's more like the national standard. If payday falls on the weekend or holiday, the payment will usually be made on the previous business day. There's no such concept as a centralized payroll authority. Instead, employers must comply with regulations from multiple government bodies such as National Tax Agency, Japan Pension Service, Hello Work, and Labor Office. When it comes to income tax withholding, in Japan, we call them Ganten Shoshu. Employers are responsible for calculating and deducting income tax at source based on the national tax tables, remitting it to the government each month. This is followed by an important year-end reconciliation process, which I will talk more about it shortly. Japan have also comprehensive social insurance system known as a Shakai Hoken. It consists of 4 mandatory schemes: health insurance, pension, nursing care insurance, and employment insurance. Both the employer and employee share the cost, and the contributions are automatically withheld from salaries. Their rates are depending on the region and employee age group, particularly for nursing care. You will start at 40 years old. Okay, let's dig more on the core payroll consideration. First of all, I will touch on the tax section because this is some of the items which is mostly talked when it comes to Japan payroll. For Japan payroll, there are 2 types of the tax which is deducted from the employee. One which is income tax, which is also called as the shotokuze. This commonly similar across all of the world. It's a standard deduction, which is withheld from the employee salary. The second one, which is called Juminzi, which is typically called inhabitant tax or resident tax. So this one usually it commonly refers more on the inhabitant tax, but some they may refer to either one of those. Okay, so I will touch more first on the income tax. First, for the income tax. For the income tax in Japan, the cycle starts from January to December. Usually, employee will need to be defined into 3 types of categories, which is ko, auto, or he. For typical salarymen, for most of the payroll, they will be categorized as ko, which is an application with the exemption of the dependent. So you will see that these for the payroll, usually the dependent is really important when it comes to the tax calculation, where the more dependent that you have means more tax exemption, meaning more pocket money that you will receive. So next, the payroll will need to be classified into either monthly, bonus, or termination pay one, as each have their own set of the tax table and the way the tax is being calculated. We will touch more on the monthly payroll because that's the most common processing in the payroll for Japan. Okay, so where the tax calculation are not dependable on the total assumption annual earning, but the monthly earning itself. This makes the calculation a little bit earlier compared to the other countries where you will need to create a projection of the tax calculation. For Japan, they are quite straightforward. As long as you have the information from the monthly payroll, typically you should be able to calculate the tax. It's quite straightforward. Okay. This goes through as well for bonus. However, I will touch more on the bonus in more details separately. The next item, also touching on the income tax, is an activity called the year-end adjustment, or typically in payroll, we will call them YEA, or in Japanese, we will call it as a nenmatsu chosei. This is perhaps one of the most critical aspects in Japanese payroll, because when we start on Japan payroll, we will first check how far it needs to be supported, because it's quite complicated. Typically, while the employees they will have their tax deducted on monthly basis. However, in December, these tax will be recalculated again, and then from there, employee will be determined whether they are under tax or overtax, and then from there, the adjustment will be made in the payroll itself rather than claiming from the government. I can see for most of the countries, they are done at level. However, for Japan, it will be done in the company level, where later on the company will need to report to the country for the tax body. So this makes a little bit of complicated, where the responsibilities of the company itself play a big role to ensure that employees get paid correctly. Okay. So in December, employees must reconcile the total income tax withheld throughout the year with the employee's actual tax liability. Earlier when we mentioned about the income tax withheld, typically it is a very simple calculation where the earning is calculated at monthly level with the number of dependents. Very straightforward and easy calculation. However, when it comes to year-end adjustment, there are multiple factors which need to be taken into consideration. So these typically start with the process of gathering documents from the employee, such as dependent declaration, insurance premium certificate, housing loan deduction, and more. And if there's any discrepancies are found, adjustment to be made in the payroll itself, in the final payroll of the year. Importantly, if an employee has left the company earlier in the year, they must file a separate tax return instead. For this activity, usually employee will be categorized into 2 categories, whether they earn more or less than 20 million annually. Where for those who earn more than 20 million annually, they will need to file the tax by themselves. However, for those earning lesser than that, it will become company's responsibility to perform the calculation in the payroll itself. Okay. During this process, for any overpayment, employees will get refunded in their last payroll cycle, which is also true for the underpayment of the tax, where their salary will get deducted. For most cases, in the monthly typical payroll run, in the logical calculation set by the Japanese government, In the monthly withheld tax calculation, they are actually withheld above than what they should. So that during each activity of the year-end adjustment, employee will get a refund instead in December. However, for the rare cases, if employees incorrectly declare their information during the monthly payroll, they might ended up having a deduction instead in the payroll. So for example, if let's say you should have received full amount of the salary, you might get a salary deducted. It can go as low as half of your salary. So this is quite sad, especially at the end of the year when you have planned for vacations and so on. You're expecting more money, but you end up not having money at all. To be in fact, I've even seen this case. So I somehow understand the situation. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so due to this, from this very secure for not only employee but also for employer to share and receive get correct information from the employee at the earliest stage possible to avoid such cases. For some cases, some companies may perform VYEA activities in January payroll. This is quite rare, and usually most of the company will try to because typically when you run in December payroll on this adjustment, some of the documents is provided by the employees. A lot of scenarios. Employee can provide the wrong information. They could not get the information on time. Sometimes even the company employees perform the calculation wrong. There might be a lot of scenarios. So the Japanese government is nice enough to allow another session, another time for the employer to run a revision calculation in January. So this is only for there is an additional adjustment or correction required due to the miss out. All the employees' annual income and tax calculation will then need to be reported to the tax authorities and municipal office by the end of January. For the tax authority, it's all piled up as one activity, which is called income tax. Reporting to the municipal or city office, it will be taken as another activity called inheritance tax, which I have mentioned earlier. To make it in simple, income tax, they are covered from January to December period. So let's take, for example, for January to December 2024, payment will be tax withheld on monthly basis. An adjustment will be performed in December 2024 payroll, and it will be performed by the company as long as you earn less than 20 million annually. Okay, an adjustment can be performed in January payroll following year. And if there's any further adjustment required, employee can do that by themselves. Next, we'll touch more on the inheritance tax. Just now earlier I've mentioned both inhabitants and residents will use inheritance tax in this context. If you may recall earlier during year-end activities, there's an activities where we will report to the municipal city office. Okay, during this period, in January, when we submit this, all right, the municipal city office, when I mentioned about municipal city office, it's not one city. Actually, it's all cities across Japan. So it can go to more than 100 cities, depending on companies, their size. Okay, each of these cities will perform another tax calculation. For each of the employees, they calculate how much these employees should be taxed. And then the amount that they should be taxed. Later, it will be sent back to the company to be deducted in the payroll. For easy mathematical term, usually these will be calculated roughly around 10% of their annual income, which later on will be broken down, divided equally to 12 months. This deduction in a payroll is called compensatory, which is also called special collection. These documents usually will be sent out to the company in around at the end of the May, and then it is expected to be deducted from June to July of 12 months payroll cycle. To make it easier, earlier I've mentioned tax January to December 2024. However, for inheritance tax, it will be deducted from June to May 2026. In this context, actually, there are another two payment methods, which is called ikatse choshu, which is one-time payment, and futse choshu, which is a normal payment. I will not go through in very detail to this, but I will just briefly explain this. For the ikatse choshu, actually there are scenarios where employees are allowed to make a lump sum payment of their inhabitant tax. For example, let's say you have already paid 3 out of 12 and you decided to settle all the remaining 9 months payment. You can technically do that, but normally people will not do that. So this one usually it will happen only in a special cases. For example, the most common case is when employee leaving the company or leaving the country. So they have an option to settle all of the payment by themselves. But there are certain scenarios where this is not possible to be deducted as a one-time payment, reason being MB earning is not enough to cover the one-time payment. So this is where it goes to another scenario, which is a normal collection, where these payment will be converted into normal payment, where the payment will be converted into payment voucher, where employees can make the payment directly to the municipal city office. Unlike income tax, these need to be paid to the municipal city office instead of the tax office, and they perform on monthly basis. So basically, when they are performed in the payroll, assuming that we have hundreds of the employees in the payroll, so each employees they sit in the different cities. So the amount that is deducted from each employees, they will need to be grouped into cities, municipal city office, and then each of the payment need to go to different city office. It sounds complicated. However, in Japan system, it's quite systematic, and the typical payroll Japan system, they are configured as long as the employee provided the city. They will the system will be able to generate a sort of like bank file where it can be made easily. So however, the critical part is to get the correct information into the payroll system. Okay. In addition, for this one, unlike the income tax, as these amounts comes from the municipal city office, so basically they don't have year-end adjustment activities, so they are not required. However, they may be sometimes where at the end of the city office, the calculation are done by human as well. They do make a mistake actually. So sometimes they will send a revision on the amount. For example, there might be an employee, one of the employee. Initially, they were deducted, for example, like 10,000, but they may be recalculate to be 9,000 and so on. So you will receive a revision, and these revisions needs to be reflected timely in the payroll to ensure that the reporting to the municipal city office is accurate based on what their expectation. The key is to have the deduction process and the payroll matches with the expectation with the municipal city office. However, in this case, rather than having one office, this time you will need to deal with multiple city office, which kind of tricky, I would say. So this is actually gets more trickier when employee resigns or move to another company, where earlier I mentioned about employee leaving, they can choose to pay one-time deduction. However, not all employees wants to do that. Okay, so basically, when they move to another company, they can choose to transfer their balance to a new company, where the current company they will need to provide a slip, which is called Ido Todoki, which the employee can submit to their new employer, so that new employer can update their record. If this is not done correctly, the municipal city office will expect the deduction to still come to the current company, which I would say this gets trickier because there's no such like actually that's a good mechanism at the moment, but last time it was worse. Okay, so the timing where the information flows, they are not it takes time, so the delay can get somewhere within 1 to 3 months, so which is not nice, to be honest. Okay. All right. Okay, to summarize on both taxes, I would summarize that both they are complicated in its own way, where income tax is more on the term of the gathering the data from the employees, and having it calculated in the system, especially for the year-end adjustment. There's too many that need to be taken into consideration where the However, for the inhabitant tax, the data we receive it from the city office. We'll need to enter in the system. The calc part is fine, but the reporting part gets complicated because you will need to submit to multiple city office, municipal city office, and especially when there's a queries, it can come from like various channels. So usually when there's a call, in this case, usually you will need to have a local person to be able to deal with them. Okay. Bonus payment, they are traditional part of Japanese compensation package, and they are typically paid out twice a year. Actually, it depends on the company, but on the two payment in the year, usually it's more on the traditional Japanese company. So they are paid once in the summer and once in the winter. While are not legally required, they are more like a culturally expected in many Japanese companies. From a payroll perspective, bonus are taxed and subject to a social insurance, but they are using a separate calculation compared to calculation. So this is very much reason why they combine these two payments. And additionally, these need to be reported separately called as a shoyo hoken. So for this one, employer should plan for these additional fillings carefully. All right. You may set pay date. However, typically in the payroll system, usually it's quite difficult to put it at the same date. So usually they will put it at a different date. A few patterns. Some patterns they put it at the end of the month. Some they will put at the beginning of the month. Just to avoid incorrect calculation. Especially true where some of this bonus calculation it relies on the salary earning determine the rates as well. So it gets trickier there. Okay. And at the end of the day, this will later on impact on the yearly tax activities as well, which I mentioned earlier. Just now, I do mention about summer and winter. For summer, typically it will be paid roughly around end of July or earlier of August. So for the bonus for the December, it will be either end of November or December. Reason being is that there will be a long holiday. This is more like a cultural in Japan where they will have a long holiday where they will either utilize their leave balances and so on. It will be around the last week of the December till the first week of January. So usually this is more like a cultural where the family gathers, go to hometown, clean out the house, so more. So please expect Japanese people will take a holiday during this period. Okay. All right. We'll talk more on the statutory leave and benefits. Okay, for Japan, paid leave entitlement in Japan begins at 10 days per year after 6 months of the continuation employment, and which increase with years of service. So one unique aspect for the Japan is that unused paid leave can expire after 2 years, unless it is stipulated in the internal policies. So surprisingly to many global employers, okay, sick leave in Japan is not a statutory right. So usually it's handled internally through company rules or via short-term disability plans. Okay, or it's just simply put, they just apply it as an unpaid leave. So this is some cultures which probably some people from outside Japan, when they see it, they don't really understand why Japan are doing this. In Japan, while they do have a paid leave, due to their culture, I also do payroll. I also manage time attendance as well, as part of my project. So I've managed to see some of the patterns, leave patterns taken by the employees as well. So I can see that even though they have a lot of leave balances, but they rarely take leave balances. As this usually when it gives a wrong impression to their colleagues, like when you take leave, meaning you are not efficient. Okay, so I find that this is quite interesting to see this kind of data. So due to this, okay, it's kind of difficult for Japan government, like how they can enforce like people to go more on the work-life balance. So some of the initiatives that the government have already done in the past couple of few years back, they even introduced a new national leave. The latest one was a Mountain Day, which is celebrated in 11 August. You may also notice earlier I've mentioned that the number of the annual leave in Japan are quite little compared to the other countries. And this is actually because Japan have most national holiday compared to the other countries where they have 15 or more days in a year. And in addition, these holidays actually are set next to each other. So which often, usually company will use this opportunity to tell employee, hey, please take this holiday during this period because we're going to do an office shutdown. So one of the holiday that I mentioned just now is the Auburn break in the August at the end of the year. And they have also typical a long leave period during earlier of May, which is also called Golden Week. So please also take note when you do operation with Japan, these are the 3 periods where you need to pay attention to in the project, okay? All right, next I will cover more on the fixed and the variable pay. Japan compensation models often includes both base salary and various allowances such as commuting, housing, family support, and some includes regional cost of living adjustment. This is quite interesting because when I see payroll for other countries, I can see these typically unique only in Japan. So it is very difficult to explain this to other people. So I will not try to touch in very detail on these items. So these must all be explicitly listed in the employment contract. So many companies also follow seniority based or longevity based on the pay structure, especially in more traditional ways. So transparency and consistency in the documentation is very crucial on that. So earlier I mentioned, I will try to touch more only for 2 types of the allowances because on all Japan payroll, these 2 allowances are more common compared to the others. The first one I would like to touch is housing allowance. In Japanese, they call Jutakutate. Actually, these allowances, they have a combination set. So I will only touch one, which is the housing allowance itself. In a typical Japanese company, company will bear a housing cost of the employee. So it can be several packages for this. So the most common one where a company will give an allowances to the employee based on if let's say they are staying at their own house, or company can rent a house on behalf of the employee, and then a deduction will be performed in the payroll. However, company will cover half of the portion of the allowances. So this one usually true for bigger companies, especially when they engage with another vendor, like a housing vendor, which help the company to find housing for their employees. Why do you have this scheme? Actually, this is more like in Japan, it is quite norm for employee to be relocated to another location. So usually a company will engage another vendor to find a house for them when they are relocated. So this one more common for bigger companies, okay? So they have another scheme, housing scheme for relocation, which I mentioned earlier. Either way, for this one, I would say it is quite interesting because for each of the companies that I dealt with, they have a different scheme of mechanism. Some of them, they will consider the number of the dependents staying in the house. Some of them even consider the location where the house is. For example, those people who are staying in the Tokyo or a bigger city, larger cities, they will be entitled for more allowances compared to those who are living outskirts. So which is quite interesting. And this actually makes it more difficult. The thing is that usually in the payroll, usually when you try to pay an allowance, you will try to make everyone like all the same amount. Or maybe they will have like a 2 or 3 tier scheme where it depends on the manager or employee. But for this case, different amount for different employees, which is quite interesting, I would say. It's quite difficult, especially when we talk about global, they will say, hey, Japan, can you just try to standardize it? And then they will say, oh, we cannot standardize it because people will find it unfair. That's what Japan is. When it comes to the fairness, they will always be on top. All right, next I will touch more on the commuting allowance, which is also called as a taking tate in Japan. Okay, for this one, I find it most likely unique unique as compared to the other countries. All right. When we talk about commuting allowance, okay, this is very common for most of the Japanese companies. To make it simple, I will just cover more on the train transportation because this is the most common transportation method in Japan. After all, we know that Japan have one of the most complex train system in the world, and most of the people use that. Okay. Okay. For the commuting allowance, what they can do is that whenever they travel from home to office, then they can claim it from the company. So for this one, they are paid based on the distance from their home. So basically, each of the employees will have a different amount. Okay, so this how they are being paid. They have different schemes, but for Japan, usually they can either be paid on the 6-month basis, assuming 6-month basis, as in they can apply for a 6-month coupon commuting fees from the train, and then they can get paid from the payroll from there as well. However, from here, I can see that due to the COVID, I can see company, they are trying to change the pattern where you see during these periods, people are starting to work more from working from home. So there will be less reason to apply for this. So I can see that some companies, they are changing from the 6-month transportation to a monthly transportation, that where employee will just need to report how many times that they go to the office, and that will be multiplied by the number of commute fees, return fees, and which will be paid later on in the payroll as well. So this is quite interesting. Reason being is that whenever employees submit this, okay, how can we determine whether the amount that they travel from home to office is correct or not? That's no way we can tell. Okay, so usually in this case, some of the activities done by either the HR, or sometimes they will just ask a vendor, or they have a system on this actually. All right, where they will check employee address, they will put an office address, they will check the travel route, and then see what the most efficient way to travel. And then from there, okay, they will just multiply. So some employees, when they travel, okay, they don't go on from point A to point B. So they can usually do a little bit detour. So usually sometimes the little detour is acceptable. For example, when we enter in the system, it counts as a travel when you transfer the train. So usually there's a threshold for that. So the logic policies, this one depends on the policy of the company. So usually it gets trickier there as well. Okay. Next on the resident and non-resident taxation. So in Japan, for non-residents, typically individuals who have been in country for less than a year without a permanent home, tax only on their Japanese source income, which is subject to a flat withholding rate of 20.42% with no deductions. In contrast, residents follow progressive tax brackets eligible for standard deduction. Residency determines it based on the duration of stay and visa type. The next one will be on the social insurance. Earlier we covered on the health, pension, nursing care, and employment insurance. Excluding employment insurance, which is a percentage driven, the remaining 3 are table bracket driven. So how this works, employees' fixed earning will fall under a certain earning range, which then reported to the social insurance office. Then they will be graded accordingly based on the earning of the 3-month earning pattern. And then later on, it will be registered in the payroll system. So usually these activities are captured during GAPPEN process, activities called GAPPEN, which is processed on monthly activities. Similarly, there will be an annual revision, which is called Sante, which will be using fixed earning from April, May, and June, and later on updated in October payroll. All right, the last subject, which I find it quite interesting to discuss with, is about my number, which is also referred to as a national ID, which is introduced in 2015. While this is not impacting payroll calculation, however, employers, they are required to gather this information from employee. Due to the data sensitivity and the requirement to have this displayed in some payroll-related documents, it is crucial for you to discuss how this data to be stored. Okay, most of the Japan payroll implementation that are involved with, Usually, when we discuss about this will be some blockage that we'll encounter to see how this can be securely saved by the vendor and so on. So this is a tricky part. Okay, what's changed recently in the payroll? So let's talk about reform. So recently what I noticed is that Japan is a country who likes paper most compared to other countries. So they recently changed on the acceptance on the digital pay slip. So digital it becomes more common, especially on the younger employees. So that said, employers must obtain consent before transitioning to an electronic format. The next one is overtime recording and compliance. So since the 2019 labor law reforms, employers must keep accurate daily working hours recorded, even for managers. So for overtime pay now follows strict rules, 125% pay rate for hours exceeding 40 hours a week, rising to 150% for late night shift, which is covers from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m., and even 160 to 200% for public holidays or extreme overtime scenarios. So this will be more like case by case. There's also discretionary work schemes, which allows for flexible working hours in roles where measuring exact time isn't practical. This is more like those sales people where they need to visit, they will be able to do sales only during certain period of time. So like R&D or creative workers. However, sometimes misuse have led to like increased scrutiny on this. So employees must obtain formal labor management agreements and file them with the labor office to remain compliant. Health insurance premium rate, which is also called Kenko health insurance, have recently changed in some of the prefectures. So employers should update their deduction tables and communicate changes to the employees clearly so that they know how it will be impacting their payroll. Some of the items that I would like to discuss as well is an introduction of the e-tax and the EL tax digital submission. Earlier we talked about activities submission at the end of January after the year-end adjustment. So for the submission after the year-end activities, previously these are done via paper. So it is very tedious work, especially it involves like hundreds of pages. So now when it being changed into digital, so all these submissions are as simple as uploading the file and pressing a button. It makes life much easier compared to before. Very happy with it, to be honest. I swear to God, I'm very happy with this.
Yeah.
Okay, and finally, some of the best practice, especially for those foreign and global employers. First thing first, please work with your local payroll expert. Japan payroll landscape is complex and heavily documentation driven. So local providers can help navigate submission timelines, resolving obligations, and audit risk. So I highly recommend you to please involve with them. And also the next one, please use bilingual employment contracts. I can see these more common for global companies. So they should have detail on every salary components and benefits entitlements, which includes bonuses, allowances, and working hour as well. And the next one will be respect the local custom and expectations. Japanese, they built on the respect and structure and long-term loyalty. So building a trust, especially during project phase, okay, is just as important as technical accuracy. To be honest, I can, this is one of my experience. So you need to gain trust before you work with them. So you'll need to be creative on that. The next one, please do not overlook monthly and annual filing, because when you have an error in the monthly tax payment or failure to perform year-end adjustment, these can trigger penalties and inspection. And you try not to mess around with the Japan authorities. They are very detailed. And I can tell you, please do not try. Do not try to mess with them. Okay. All right. Then last one, I think this is a very crucial to be discussed as well, because I can see most of the companies, they don't take this seriously, which is a time tracking system. Please invest in that. Okay. Whether if it's a biometric or app-based, okay, please having a robust system to monitor work hours is not only a good practice, it's a legal requirement. Especially when I mentioned about the new reform which takes place in 2019. So government right now, they are more sensitive on how you track employees' working time. So while it's not impacting payroll, they check.
Yeah.
Okay, please do that. So at the end of the day, I would summarize. Okay, Japan payroll, they are not just about ticking compliance boxes. it reflects a deeply cultural approach on the work and compensation. So by understanding both of the regulatory details and the workplace values behind them, employers can build a smoother, more respectful operation in one Asia's most mature employment market. Thanks again, Freddie, and I look forward for the case study.
That was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Ilhami.
Mm.
There's so much detail there, and it's going to be really, really helpful for people who are interested in Japanese payroll, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So for our case study, we're going to explore a fictional tech company, NextWave, which launched first in Tokyo last year with a team of 25 employees. So I'm just going to share it for the viewers on the screen.
Okay, yeah. I can see your screen.
If you'd like to begin, that'd be great.
Okay, let me have a look. A company name called NextWave. NextWave launched its Tokyo office with 25 staff. Within the first year, several payroll compliance issues emerged, flagged during an audit. So we can see the challenges are year-end adjustment error. I would expect this might happen. Incomplete dependent information cost under reporting income tax. Bonus misclassification. Bonuses were paid as discretionary but not separated properly on payslip. Overtime mismanaged, engineer regularly exceed 45 hours, resident status misunderstanding, and short-term remote workers. Okay, we'll go through each line by line. I would say that this kind of mistake is not only for companies who just started in Japan. Even the old companies in Japan, they will make this similar mistake, I can tell you for sure, okay? So that's why you need to have someone who's very good in Japanese payroll just to ensure you don't make any of these mistakes. Okay. First thing first. I can see the year-end adjustment errors. So for the year-end adjustment mistake, okay, I would believe from what I can summarize here, the company failed to collect some of the employees' dependent deduction documents on time. So I believe this delayed on the accurate tax reconciliation and resulted in underreporting. This is one which I've mentioned earlier in the December payroll processing. When it's under reporting. So what happens is that employee will get deduction more in the December payroll. So I've already covered this earlier. So if let's say in this case, if you notice this earlier, okay, if you diligently do a payroll, you should be able to capture this at earlier stage. So when you notice this earlier, usually what you will do is that you try to inform employee in advance before coming to the year-end activities. So as most employees, they are expecting to refund in December. So this is especially true if they have a vacation plans and expectation. So after all, employees will only be able to know about whether they will have a under report or over reports only in their December payroll. So this is very crucial and not to be messed around with. All right, the next item, I can see it's more on the misclassified bonus. Okay, earlier I've also touched on this. In Japan, monthly payroll and bonus, they need to be separated. So what I can understand here, bonus, they are paid discretionary without a proper separation in the payslip. So I would assume, I believe in the one payslip, salary and monthly, they combine it together into one cycle. So it's like calculating a bonus with a salary rate. Okay, so this led to a social insurance underpayment, which requires a correction. So actually, it also impact for your income tax as well, because when you calculate it in the different table, you might also have an impact on the income tax as well. So this actually leads to the tedious correction and reporting to the statutory office, which I will try to avoid at all costs as well. Very tedious to correct that. Okay, the next one is on the lack on the overtime tracking. We can see here engineers working more than 50 hours, 5 hours per month, not being tracked accurately. So the most common one, actually these need to be reported to the clocking hours, how many hours the employees work. It needs to be reported to the labor office on monthly basis. It depends on the company and the scale. So in this case, I believe the labor office, they will issue a warning during inspection. So usually it will start from here. So usually while this doesn't have any impact in the payroll calculation, however, they will start digging on other calculations, whether the overtime is being paid correctly or not. And then they will ask you to provide all the historical clock data for all employees and see whether if the time system is being set up correctly or not. So basically, you will need to pull a huge set of data, which I can tell this will take more time to just prepare that data itself. The next one is more touching on the non-resident tax error. So we can see here remote workers. Usually this one common for companies who start their business in Japan. So remote workers, they are on temporary visa, were taxed as a resident instead of non-resident. So depending on their earning, for most of the cases, they will be under tax, I would say. So during the monthly process. So this creates a discrepancies in the net payment and reporting. I would say this will be quite huge, especially on the tax reconciliation process as well. The next item, I can see more on the commuting allowance. So what I understand that they have applied a flat transport subsidy, but they didn't follow the non-taxable threshold, which is set at currently set by the government at 150,000 per month. So what solution that I can see here is that first we can introduce a local HRIS with time and attendance tracking for overtime compliance. The next item, we can reissue a corrected payslip and update social insurance filings. Next, we can implement a year-end adjustment preparation checklist and timelines. Usually for company, I would highly suggest that planning to be started at earlier stage. Probably you can start from September, align the timing and timeline with your vendors, just to ensure that all the data are collected on time so that you can perform the processing in December without any hiccups. And then the next item, we can see that we need to engage with a local partner to review employee tax residency status to ensure that it is performed, processed correctly. Last but not least, update benefit policies to align with the Japanese taxation threshold. Okay, thank you, Freddie.
That was fantastic.
Mm.
That was so well put, and it's really helpful for anyone who's going to be
No problem.
who's going to face those issues. So thank you. You really broke those challenges down into an easy and understandable ideas for Next Wave. So, shall we move on to the final part of today's Japan session and answer a few questions that have come in from our audience?
Yes.
So, the first question I have is it mandatory to perform a year-end adjustment in Japan?
Yes. Okay, if the employee is still employed in the December in a company and haven't filed a separate tax return, so the employee must perform the adjustment in the payroll to ensure the correct amount of income tax has been paid. So for this one, when you're involved with the payroll vendor, please ensure the scope of the supports which they will provide for this activity.
Fantastic. My next question is, how is commuting allowance treated for tax purposes? I think you might have covered this a bit earlier, didn't you?
Yeah, correct. So commuting allowance, okay, compared to other earnings allowances in Japan, commuting allowance is the commonly counted as a non-taxable. It's tax-free up until 150,000 Japanese yen per month. However, anything above that is subject to income tax and the social insurance. While this is not common to reach up until that point, however, I've seen some cases where it can go beyond that, especially when you use Shinkansen to travel to office where it's possible.
Awesome. So next one is, can bonuses be excluded from social insurance?
Actually, bonuses, they are included in the social insurance contributions, but they are reported separately on the bonus declaration, which is called Shoyo Hoken. So this is very crucial to be performed accurately.
Awesome. Next one, do all employees have to clock in or out under Japan's labor laws?
Yes, they do, okay, unless they are under an approved discretionary work scheme. So even managers actually have time record under the 2019 labor reforms. For managers, while they have no impact in the payroll calculation, they are recorded more on the recording purpose to ensure they are not excessively working more than what they should.
Amazing. And what's the penalty for late tax filing or non-submission?
Okay, the national tax agencies may impose penalties, tax status, and in rare cases trigger an audit. Timeliness is very critical in terms of this. So if you notice any discrepancies in your payroll, it would be best to report it or you engage with your expert in this field and by consulting to professionals as soon as possible.
Okay. And then, so how is overtime calculated under Japanese law?
All right, for overtime, they are typically paid at 125% of their regular hourly wage for work beyond 8 hours a day or 40 hours a week. So for late night workers, for 10 p.m. to 5 a.m., the rates increase to 150% and higher rates apply on holiday. So usually for this one, I think I've also mentioned this, they are divided into categories like employees and managers for overtime calculation. So for Japan, it is required for employees before they do any overtime, they are required to get an approval from their supervisor or some cases from HR before performing the overtime. After all, supervisors, they need to ensure their subordinate have a good work-life balance. So for some cases, I think this is more common nowadays, where those people are employees with managers residing outside Japan. So it is very difficult for these managers to monitor their subordinates work in Japan, their working time. So I even see some of them, what they do is that they involve someone who at same level of their managers to observe their subordinates working time, or sometimes they will involve their HR just to ensure that these employees are not working excessively. So this is quite difficult to explain due to the differences of culture.
Okay.
So they
And
track this very well.
yeah, and then when are monthly salaries typically made in Japan?
All right, for most companies, pay salaries, they are made on 25th of each month, but it's common to see payment made in between 25th and the end of the month. If the pay date falls on the weekend or holiday, so payment will be made on the prior business day.
Okay. So final question for you. Are retirement contributions mandatory in Japan?
Okay, for the retirement contributions, yes, employees and employers, they must contribute to the national pension and employees pension insurance, Kosenenkin. These contribution rates are set by government and reviewed annually. So these rates usually are updated around a certain point of the time, so which is in March or April or September, October. So these two periods. So for employers with no change in their income, usually during this period, they will notice a change on the amount paid in their bank account as the rate increase. So rate increase, lesser pay. So please, you can expect more questions coming from employees during this period.
Amazing. Thank you so much for answering those questions.
Welcome.
There's so much useful information there. So it's clear that while the system is structured and efficient, it really leaves no room for error, especially when it comes to reporting and employee documentation. To our audience, thank you for joining us for the Japan session of Global Payfest 25. We hope this session gave you actionable strategies to support your teams or expansion plans in Japan. As always, this session will be available on demand. Up next, we head to Singapore, where Natalie will continue exploring Asia's unique payroll challenges and best practices with Debbie Morale. Ilhami, any final thoughts before we wrap?
Okay, thank you, Freddie. And I believe you managed to capture the essence of the Japan payroll. To quickly recap, due to the volume of different activities throughout the years, Japan have efficiently arranged each of these activities on each month for different annual activities on top of their regular payroll, salary, and bonus run, which some I was not able to cover in this session. So this translates to a non-stop payroll activity throughout the year. So when you are planning to do a Japan payroll project, it is highly advisable to engage with the local partners and external professionals to ensure it is properly planned and executed. After all, we are talking about payments to employees, and it's company's responsibility to pay their employees accurately on time. So losing trust from your employees is what you try to avoid most. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ilham, and thank you all once again. I'm Freddie Morehouse signing off from the Japan session of Global Payfest 25. Natalie will see you in Singapore, and I'll be back in 12 hours in time for Germany. Thank you very much.
Thank you.